This first episode of The Penguin on HBO and Max has a great early scene where Oz, aka the Penguin, meets up with gangster heir Alberto Falcone in the remnants of the Iceberg Lounge.
I love that scene. It totally sold me on the series and Oz's character. Are you going to do a scene breakdown for it?
That's exactly what I was thinking of doing for the podcast. We can discuss it now. When I look at scenes and analyze them, I try to figure out how they're structured, as this just sharpens our skills as storytellers.
I remember you would use some principles from Judith Weston's book Directing Actors, like 4 things to analyze a scene: subtext, objective, metaphor, and I think it was called result form.
That's right. I mean, we could do a broad and general analysis of the scene between Oz and Alberto without going into each dramatic story beat one at a time. For example, what really struck me about this scene is it really is built on this framework of Alberto and Oz figuring out their relationship dynamic in the wake of Carmine's death. But Alberto is consistently trying to put Oz down and put him in place.
You mean like Alberto is exerting his dominance over Oz?
That's part of it. If we look at near the beginning of the scene, there are 2 beats where Alberto offers a necklace to Oz under the guise of telling Oz he should give it to a girl, and another beat where Alberto shows us Salvatore's ring and asks Oz if he wants to try it on. But Oz declines to try on the ring. In both beats, Alberto is testing Oz and subtly exerting control and dominance over him. Notice that Oz makes it a point to call Alberto boss a few times, and he's trying to appease him. Oz is playing along, and he made a smart move to not try on the ring because trying it on would be crossing a line. He knows that Alberto could flip on a dime and try to use that against him.
Oh, I see that. Oz is actually really smart in trying not to ruffle too many feathers.
He's looking out for himself. Later on, Alberto keeps dressing Oz down, as we see in the story beats, where he tells Oz that he knows Oz took a cut from the money he earned from his dad. Alberto calls him a good soldier, but a dirty one. And then he says his dad knew what it meant for someone like Oz to get a cut. These are subtly disguised insults to put Oz down. The subtext here is that Alberto is saying, "I'm the boss."
I think it makes Alberto look more and more unlikable. I guess that's how the writers build up the tension to the end of the scene when Oz kills him.
Yeah, that's right. But before we get there, let's think about how Judith Weston would break down this scene. We can ask, what does character A want to get out of character B, and vice versa? That's the objective. We can ask, and what does Oz want Alberto to do for him? I think Oz wants to keep the peace, so he wants Alberto to accept him as part of his crew and let him do his business. Meanwhile, Alberto wants to emotionally and mentally beat down and control Oz, so one way to think about directing his acting performance is to think about getting Oz to grovel or show his loyalty in a humiliating way.
We never get to that point though, because Oz kills him.
That's true, and I was about to get to that part of the scene where Oz starts to tell a story about the gangster Rex Calabrese from his younger years. The camera just sits on Oz as he tells the story and how Rex was a man who provided and protected his people in the neighborhood. And then they have a parade for him when he dies. The lead into this part of the scene is Alberto asking Oz if he could be like his old man, his father. And it's partly an honest, self-reflecting question, as well as partly Alberto laying a trap for Oz.
I felt like it was more Alberto was honestly asking Oz his opinion about becoming someone like his dad, Carmine Falcone.
It could be, and I think the actor played it that way. When Oz starts to tell the story about Rex, I was thinking about the other guidelines from Judith Weston for the scene. So the action verb for Oz to play could be to appeal or to befriend Alberto through sharing this anecdote. This action verb gives the actor something to hone their performance on.
I see that now. It felt really friendly between them during that part of the scene, or at least Oz was treating him like a friend.
Right, now let's look at the metaphor, which could be Oz approaching this as if he's talking to his brother. That also informs the tone of the performance. The result form is sincere, which describes how this comes off as in terms of feeling and texture. And the subtext is Oz revealing unconsciously part of his desire to be respected and valued like Rex one day. The problem becomes when Alberto picks up on that and then turns around to humiliate Oz.
Yeah, that's where the scene really shifted, because Alberto rejects Oz's story and mocks him for it. It's like he's still trying to humiliate Oz.
And that's what pushes Oz over the line. It's too much for him and he can't hold in his anger anymore. We can see in his eyes when Alberto starts to mock him about Rex. Oz is caught in this vulnerable moment and it angers him that he's being mocked. It really hurts.
I think that's what makes it such a powerful scene. And honestly, I keep wanting to watch it over and over.